Good to go?
Yep.
Welcome back to the Open Up Podcast, everyone, into episode 65 with Ben Kelly, brother. Thank you for doing this.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
First question I want to ask is, how are you in a t-shirt right now? Do you not live
How
in
am I?
Perth?
No, I live in Bali.
Oh, you bastard. No wonder.
Yeah. You're lucky I'm actually got a shirt on, mate. It's not.
Well, mate, I'd probably get more views if you didn't.
Yeah.
First question straight off the bat, a little bit deep. Could you describe yourself to us, or how you view yourself as a man and or human?
Oh wow. That's a really tough one. I think obviously over the years how we identify ourselves and who we identify ourselves as, and who we are goes a long way to obviously shaping our reality and shaping everything around us, and obviously heavily around our internal space. So day to day, I mean, again, how I view myself always changes depending on things that are varying in my life, things that are the way I'm showing up around things in my life, occurrences that how I treat things, how I handle things, all these types of things always deviate and fluctuate. But I identify myself as someone who, I guess, right now is emotionally intelligent, is can handle stress more effectively. I think I'm someone that is super curious. I'm someone that loves to learn, loves to find out how little I actually know. I'm someone who, is authentic. I feel like I'm authentic. I feel like I'm congruent with my word. I place integrity very high up there on my values. I try to be someone who is a good brother and a good son and a good friend to the people around me, a good uncle, someone who wants to see people get stronger, and someone who's in service of people becoming better versions of themselves. So obviously, I mean, and then there's a lot of other aspects that I do see myself, someone that maybe doesn't execute on things as efficiently as they should, someone that, from time to time does, has a little bit knee-jerk reactions to some things that show up. We're always growing and improving. Yeah. While I kind of rattle off a bunch of good stuff, there for sure is a bunch of stuff that I definitely feel like I need to improve in, and over time, slowly but surely, maybe get on top of. But yeah, I think, someone that just has a thirst for growth and knowledge and wants to try and be better.
Before you give us a breakdown of your childhood up until, I guess, 23, when you're going to share your story, you said you're someone who likes to find out how little they know. How did you cultivate that trait or ability? Because for most people, that's a scary thought to confront that.
Yeah, I think a lot of times with people's mindsets is they just get into this rumination of thoughts. It's this circular line of thinking where they think they've explored a lot and they've come to this level of certainty where there's no room for flexibility and everything becomes very rigid because you feel like you've exhausted all possibilities. And I think one of the biggest things is I started to end up becoming more curious and hanging around a lot more people that were curious in the personal development space and in the self-awareness space. And they put me, I think it only took one little thing to put me in the direction of learning. And I didn't even know self-development or personal development was even a thing. I had no idea. And I think that probably is what contributed to me feeling very fixed in my mindset and feeling like the way that I was feeling was absolute.
Yeah.
I think that environment obviously steered me towards learning. And then I read a couple of things that I didn't realize were things that were even things to know. And once that one little thing happened, or a perspective that I had not taken into account, I was very curious around, well, how much else don't you know? And, and this is the thing with people in personal development sometimes is a lot of times, or people just generally trying to grow, is they go and search to become intelligent. But I really think that the threat with that is eventually there might be a day where you do feel like you've reached that place and you stop wanting to grow and you go back to a very fixed mindset. I think if we develop a mindset of going to learn how much we're not aware of and how little we know, I think that's always going to be a good trait to have in continually searching and looking and having wonder around ourselves and around the world and around our thoughts and around our beliefs and around everything. And I think that's just held me in a continual state of not being rigid and just having a growth mindset, understanding that, the things that I'm so certain on may not be the case, and to really just have a level of curiosity around that and explore those things. So yeah, there was a number of things that went into me, first off starting to become curious. But once that happened and I realized maybe I didn't know everything, I think that was the best thing, was just understanding that I didn't know everything. And maybe the thoughts that had led me to, detrimental mindsets the options weren't exhausted. And I think that was just a really exciting thing. It was just know that my thoughts that I thought were I hadn't exhausted all possibility.
Yeah.
And once I realized that, just a lot of hope came over me, a lot of potential for change came over me. And it just really stemmed the tide and started to interrupt my circular thinking with different thoughts that hadn't been placed in there. And it just really did stem the tide of that circular negative fixed type of thinking that kind of can lead people into really dark places.
That's awesome, man. And that's obviously how you get better as well. You don't get better without resistance or without persevering through a struggle, and it's better to choose to go through a struggle than to be slapped with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, everyone's gonna get this stuff. I mean, even to this day, I have people ask me, like, do you ever feel yourself slipping back into things? It's like, well, this is part of being a human being. Again, people, I don't think they allow themselves that humanness. I think they try to become more than human, and it's very hard and lofty standards that people kind of set themselves up for. And just knowing, we are going to get struggles, and we get to, solve puzzles. I like to look at it a lot of the time as, this is a puzzle I get to solve. And, there's excitement around that, and there's curiosity around, once I work my way through this, I'm going to be able to provide huge value to people and learning how it was that I actually went about conquering this challenge or solving this puzzle. And that at the end of the day has become a massive catalyst for a lot of the influence I have was, the opportunity that I got given through my struggles. Looking back, the greatest things that ever happened to me were my struggles. They provided an opportunity for me to go and work out how to solve the puzzles. And it allowed me to provide a lot of value to other people, So struggles could be a really, really fantastic thing if we really adopt them and take them on and meet them head on, But again, there is a bit of challenge and there is a bit of resistance towards them, but that's part and parcel. We're all going to get that.
Can you give us a breakdown or summary of like childhood up until your first story, or the story that you're going to share?
Yeah, so I grew up in Perth in Western Australia, very, very blue collar. A lot of people have their idea of what life should be like, and it can kind of formulate a very rigid mindset within the community, not just with people themselves, but through the group. And I grew up with 3 younger sisters and a single mum, so I was surrounded by women, and even at a young age when I wasn't maybe at the physical strength to be able to protect and serve and defend, and not able to earn an income, even at a really early age, I felt this identity that I had to fulfill, and without those things, it made it very hard for me to even attend to that. And that kind of transitioned into my adulthood, where I had this ideology around what a man was supposed to be, how they're supposed to show up, how they're supposed to feel. They were supposed to, be this, be that, and it made it very rigid. And my identity became very stiff and very inflexible as to how I could show up. And there was not really, I didn't allow for any room of deviation. And when things kind of contradicted that, which they will, it kind of set off a lot of things in me, like feeling like I was failing, feeling like I wasn't fulfilling, my script. And at the end of the day, with everything I had taken on and developed this script for my life and for myself that I just took on from a whole bunch of people around what it means to be, a man of the family. And this script that I created made it very, very difficult for anything else to be. And when it was anything other than what I thought it needed to be, I felt really shitty that I wasn't fulfilling this script that, society calls upon us to, have, or you just lump on yourself. And again, I developed that at a very young age, wanting to serve and do all these things for my family. And when I felt like I wasn't fulfilling that, I felt like I did feel like I was failing. But again, it was probably due to the fact that I just created this rigid script for myself that I had just adopted.
Yep.
And it allowed for very little room. So I did develop child,
lost you for a second,
develop
brother.
traits and hello, am I back?
Audio,
hello?
Yes. Video, no.
Hello, am I there? You got me?
Audio, yes.
You got me?
No video.
Hello?
Nah, no video there, my man.
No video. Have you got audio?
Yeah.
Have you got audio back?
Yeah, I've got the audio.
Okay. I'll try and turn my camera back on now. All good?
Ah, there we go.
Better?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So, I think I developed and repressed traits that I felt were required for my safety, for the safety of the family, not showing emotion, not being this, that, the other, because it was just what I felt like was required to fill out this identity. And again, that transitioned into adulthood and with these, wounds that maybe we carry as a child, we take them into adulthood and we're left expecting to be better than the wounds that we have when we're a child as an adult, and they're still there and they're still carried. And I just I hadn't done any work to kind of create a resolution around those things until I started to kind of be curious.
Okay. And I guess looking back now after all the work you've done to the position you've got yourself into now, looking back at that time, do you think you had a clear understanding of who you actually were? Even now, I mean, we're always trying to get a clear understanding of who we think we are. And that's a great idea to understand. But I mean, for the most part, we're 95% unconscious of most things. So we do create an identity as a safety mechanism. And if we know that as well as we possibly can, then it increases our safety. And this is why people have, massive conflicts when anything happens to them that contradicts their identity, they flare up. And I found myself in that position. And obviously I really didn't know myself, because anytime something contradicted my identity or who I knew myself to be, I would flare up. My anger would just be off the rails. And again, it was probably towards an identity that wasn't even mine. I was protecting an identity that wasn't even written for me, a script that wasn't even written for me. And I was going to work hard because at least I knew who it was. Yeah. And at least they had done a good enough job of me surviving up until this point. So, but even till this day, I mean, it's a nice idea to think we know who we are, but and it makes us feel safe to know that. But the reality is, there's so many levels and layers that we're so unaware of
we can do our best to increase our self-awareness, but it will be a never-ending journey to really unravel everything and sort of get to the crux of who we're meant to be authentically. So it's a never-ending journey of discovery when it comes to that, for sure. I mean, who I was back then, I identify as two different people, and I no doubt will identify myself as a completely different person in a year, 2 years time. I think that that willingness to allow that to happen sets people in good stead. I mean, you want to be able to look back at yourself in a year and take the piss out of who you saw yourself to be and showed up. You know, I mean, I look back to a year, 2 years now, and I laugh at some of the things that I kind of did and showed up as, and you kind of want to hope that that's the case. Otherwise, you're just sort of you're not unraveling, or you're not, experiencing different parts of yourself, and everything to do with your psyche, and everything to do with your soul and your purpose and your potential. So it's never ending. I mean, again, the short answer is I'd like to be able to feel like I knew myself then, feel like I knew myself now. But again, the reality is, again, how I perceive myself is going to be different between how I perceive myself and the meta perception of how other people view me. So there's obviously how we view ourselves, how other people view us, and then the real self.
Okay. I think a better way to ask it would be, you talk about it, you feel like you had a script you needed to fulfill. Do you feel like intuitively, or I guess, do you feel like that was the authentic you filling the script? Like, was there any resistance to filling that role?
No, I mean, I was stepping fully into it because I didn't really know that was just within the confines of my community. That was the pretty clear cut understanding of what it was meant to be.
Okay.
And there was no flexibility to kind of show up any other way, really, in my head. And they were all that script was, no one else is doing. We're in control of whether or not we take on society's norms.
Yeah.
And so I'm not pinning it on anyone else. It's that when you've got consistency through a lot of people, and you can go, well, that's right. Well, that's right. Well, that's right. And ingrained into us is a direction and an authentic self that it doesn't give a shit about what experiences we had, and how we formed these scripts and these identities that we feel like. But at some point, the authentic self is going to rear its head, and it normally comes up with feeling, you're having a course correction, or you're met at a crossroads, or you're having a little bit of internal struggle or internal dialogue that's contradictive. And I think at some point it has to rear its head. It's the same as, when you go into dating, is you could put your best foot forward and act like how you think everyone around you needs to be. But at some point, if you don't display the good and the bad of yourself in full expression, it's even if you put your best foot forward into what you thinking people need to be or what you need to be, the authentic self is going to have to rear its head at some point. This is why a lot of relationships end up, deviating, is because people go and be in a script of what they think the other person wants, and then their authentic self can't do it anymore. It rears its head, and ultimately the relationship takes a different turn because people didn't understand the full realm of who that person was, because maybe they didn't in themselves. So
I think that's a good segue into your story, which starts at about 23. You okay to walk us through that?
Yeah, so I think when I found myself in my greatest bout of, I guess you could say my greatest bout of mental disdain and, my bout with depression was around about 24, 25, 23, 24, 25. Again, I felt that, getting a mortgage was the right thing to do. I found myself in a job that was there was no safety around it. I was a bricklayer. You still there?
Yep.
You there? Yeah, I was no, I'm good now. I was a bricklayer, so if we didn't work, you didn't get paid. You didn't get paid if the weather was bad. You didn't get paid if dodgy bosses, materials not on time. There was a lot of things taken out of your control. So I felt a lot of pressure, because of that. And I added to it because I felt like I needed to get a mortgage. That was just what you did, right? And I wasn't in a position to do that. I needed to get my mum to put her house that she raised 4 kids in up as collateral just to be able to get the loan. Because as you know, you need to be able to prove to the banks that you don't need their money. Yep. And it was quite clear that I did need their money due to sort of the inconsistency of the sort of income that was coming in. I placed a lot of stress on myself, and that was a decision I made because I was following this rigid pathway that wasn't meant for me. It wasn't mine. And that led me into, and that's basically where my, a lot of my depression came from, is it was starting to rear its head that I just followed this rigid path to a point where now it's like, it's my authentic. It was saying, this is not yours. Like you're trying to fulfill this thing out that is not your requirement. And I did place a lot of stress. The story ran through my head. You're gonna lose your mum's house. It's the only thing that she has, and she raised 4 kids in, and you've done that. So I couldn't travel. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't experience life. My life became just going to work, trying to get some little bit of self-esteem up from training in the gym, and then sleeping. It was, I lost my libido. It affected my relationship. Obviously my girlfriend at the time felt like that, was me not being attracted to her. Little did she know that I was just in a depressed state, which, kind of lowered my libido, and I didn't really want physical connection. And again, I had this story in my head that I'd let my family down. I was going to cost them everything, and that was my doing. And I went and I drive to work every single day and just be, I was working a job I hated. I hate, and the other thing was I put myself in a position, but I was stuck. I felt stuck in the position, working a job that I didn't like, and having no flexibility and no freedom. I just feel like I did such a poor job of fulfilling this rollout, and that maybe I just wasn't worth being here anymore. I took out life insurance, and I was just like, well, at least if you went, then you'll be able to recoup your, fulfill your purpose, which was just to serve them. Yeah. And every day I'd drive to work and I'd be thinking, just turn the wheel into this pole right now. Just make it look like an accident. Like and for some reason I just held in. I'd show up to work and I'd be like, well, why can't you do? I'd just start crying. I'd just be on the, head on the steering wheel. It's like, why, like just in a state, like why can't you even do this? Right. And I held in. I just held in there. I just stuck in there. I just stuck in the game. Honestly, and I was just hoping for something to kind of show. And again, eventually I just broke that cycle of that thinking, but I just stayed in the game long enough for it to sort of show its head. Obviously, changing my environment was super important to doing that. Doing things that made me feel purposeful and in contribution, that were outside the realms of what I thought my identity was meant to be doing, or what my purpose was meant to be. And it just made me more hopeful every single day. And fortunate enough, I was able to make my way sort of, out of that place. But again, it's just the stories that we create in our head just gather this steam the more they're not interrupted. I think that's the important thing of being able to talk about things. It's our emotions aren't necessarily the problem. I think people have kind of, and especially men, have form this idea that feeling these emotions are the problem. I don't see it that way. I see them as like they're so needed. They're so needed that it's like having a fire alarm, right? The fire alarm, if we didn't have it, we wouldn't be alerted to a potential fire. But if it senses the smoke first, at least we get to then go and rectify it. Sometimes the alarm goes off falsely and we get frustrated with all the noise. But it's better to have it there than to not have it there.
Yep.
The problem isn't actually the emotions. They're alerting us to something that's underneath, that's not serving us well, and then we get to pay attention to it. And I think that is, one of the biggest things is not judging the fact that we're feeling these emotions. And again, sometimes the fire alarm goes off is faulty. So what would we do? We'd go and call up the servicemen and ask them to go and correct it. And that's the same thing with reaching out for therapy and reaching out for help and reaching out for guidance and being able to voice it. It's the same as just going, hey, look, my alarm's going off. I don't know why. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to be able to have it turn off. And I think, but we also need to have it there. Otherwise we end up in a fire.
Yeah. That's
and
a pretty
again,
cool analogy, man. I've never heard that.
Well, another way to look at it is it's like people think like having a sore throat or a cough is bad, but if we didn't have the sore throat, we wouldn't be able to go and then pay attention to it, to go and take what we needed to do to prevent a greater illness.
Yep.
So would we rather have not that at all to let it like completely slip through to the point where it's unpreventable or not being able to be focused on? We should be grateful for a cough or grateful for a sore throat or a runny nose, because that's just alerting us to it. That's not actually the problem. It's actually doing a really great job of allowing us to go and pay attention to something to rectify it before it gets to an extreme point. They're super serviceable, and so are our emotions. The emotions aren't the bad thing. I think a lot of times the problems aren't the problems. The problems are people's solutions to the problems.
Yep. Just on something I want to ask about, like that story, and in particular, you getting a house, knowing that you had this script that you had to fill out where you weren't really allowed to show, or you didn't believe you could show emotion to be this man and to serve your family. Was there also like a notion that you needed to be successful by getting a house?
Yeah, I think it represented, again, we fall into these social success indicators. And it's like these things have to happen for my life to have my life be deemed a success.
Okay.
Right? Things like having a partner, getting married, buying a house, having kids, doing this, doing that. And I think the biggest thing is that people have adopted other people's value systems that are not theirs, and they've forgotten about theirs, right? They've gone and ignored their own value system, taken on someone else's that's got nothing to do with them, right? And there's a way that I talk about it with people that I heard one time, and it's this guy went to see his therapist, and he said, I'm really down. And he goes, well, they had a talk, and he goes, who are you comparing yourself to? And he goes, no one. He goes, no, who really? Who are you comparing yourself to? And this guy was a doctor, had a surgery, had a couple of cars, he had a family, and he got to travel the world, and he was not happy. So he said, well, who are you comparing yourself to? And he had a really good think about it, and he goes, actually, yeah, there's one person. There's this guy up on the hill. He has 3 practices. He is making more money than me. He's got 5 cars. He's got all these things, right? And he goes, well, okay, so what's his relationship with his family like? Well, he doesn't speak to his mother-in-law, and his kids don't really see him and get to spend a lot of time with him. All right, well, how often does he get to travel? Well, he doesn't really get to travel much because he's too tied up in all these businesses. And he just said to him, okay, well, would you give up all your travel? Would you give up your relationship with your family? Would you give up the relationship with your mother-in-law and your wife for what he has? And he said, well, no. And he goes, well, there you go. And I think people really, really constantly lose sight of their own values and adopt other people's. And no wonder you're going to feel upset, is because you're trying to live to someone else's, intrinsic high values that are not meant for you.
Yeah.
And as soon as I stopped doing that and really paid attention to what my own high values are, I just wanted to try and create a more abundance of what was already there that had to have been my values. Otherwise, I just wouldn't have created it like that. So we see that all the time, is that people have this idea of success being this ladder. And it's not a ladder at all. It's just whether or not we play out and respect and fulfill our own personal intrinsic values more than not.
Yeah. Within that story, you're going through this whole period where you're really hating going to the work. You're crying in the car. Was there a turning point or an aha moment at all where you finally realize, oh shit, there may be an upside, there may be something to look forward to?
I think I'd be at work sometimes. I'd start daydreaming. I'd just be daydreaming. I was doing a job where it's pretty monotonous. Like,
yep.
you get into a trance because you just done it that many times. You're just like this, right? I'd slip into these daydreams where I just envision, and again, I had no right to feel this way around things. So I'd have these visions in my head and stories in my head that things would change, right? I'd be doing this or doing that. And the funny thing is that I had these visions in my head that I'd be out in front of people speaking or singing or acting or whatever. I wasn't rigid around what it was. It was just this idea. And this thing ended up showing up in my life that was going to create that platform for it that I didn't even know existed. I didn't even know it was a thing to be, and it wasn't even in my skill set at the time. And it ended up playing out in a way where that weird little vision in my head that I didn't feel like deserved to be there played out in a way that I could never have fathomed or ever imagined. And it was weird, but it just felt so real. I was at my most miserable, but that little vision, I think that might have just been what kept me in there, just curious to go and see or how, if it would unravel that way. And it did. I think again, like when you feel like you're at rock bottom, again, the good thing is and that was the other thing I think with me, is that I was protecting an identity of someone that I didn't even like.
Yeah.
So that made it easier to go and want to change and have my ego dented and grow and take actions that, were not the norm for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's I guess knowing that you were a guy who didn't like to show emotion and knowing what you went through while you're bricklaying, worrying about your mum, I guess having her house up as collateral, how did you treat yourself as someone who wasn't really open to showing emotion, yet you're going through all of this?
How did
you
repeat
treat
that?
yourself? Hello?
Hello? Yep.
Oh, yeah. How did you treat or speak to yourself during that period?
Just really, again, the same things over and over again. That's the trap. It's just this circular line of thinking that never gets interrupted, and it just grows legs. You're a failure. You're this, you're that, you're the other, you're all these things. You're not fulfilling your this and that. You're just so many things, right? but it was just the same thing over and over again, and it just never got interrupted.
Yeah.
And I think as well, like I didn't have a lot of self-worth in a lot of the areas that I thought I should have been doing better in. And the one thing I could control though was my health and training in the gym and what my body looked like, and that gave me some little shred of self-worth. But even then, I'd show up at the gym and look at myself in the mirror, and it wasn't necessarily that I hated how my body looked. When I looked into my eyes, I just kind of broke down. I didn't like who was inside and how he was showing up and what was happening. But again, it's just eventually, that went on for a long while. Eventually, as I said to you before, I read something that made me realize I don't know everything.
Yeah.
There was things that I didn't even know were things that needed to be known. And I think the first book I ever read was The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And there was so much perspectives in that I hadn't even taken into consideration. They weren't options. Okay. They just weren't. I think, again, with the rumination and the circular line of thinking, it's because we think we've exhausted all options. And when then you get introduced to an option that you had never even knew existed, you then start to question just how certain you are on how you view yourself.
Yeah.
Right? I think I just reached that point with, going in and being curious around developing myself, which again, I had no idea was an option. I think I just had such a fixed mindset that things were how they were. And that was that.
So knowing that's the case, I guess looking back, it's easier to see with hindsight, did you surround yourself with people who affirmed, I guess, the script that you felt you needed to fulfill?
Obviously, you kind of you navigate and deviate towards people that are similar to you. I think that's just a safety mechanism. It's like, if you're more like me, then I can know you better, and that means that I'm more safe in that understanding. So, again, I and my friends, they were great people. Maybe they were happier with their life. Maybe they were more in alignment with what they were supposed to be doing, but I wasn't. I just wasn't. So that was the difference, is that I just got more in alignment with what was really there and really for me. And that can deviate. I think then I knew that things had to change. So I made big decisions to quite rapidly change my environment. Again, I felt like at rock bottom. So, what else is there to lose? So I did change my environment to people that were happy people. I think that was a tough thing as well. It kind of sucked being around happy people. It was for someone who is in a really detrimental headspace, fucking being around really happy people was annoying. It was for a while. It really was. It was frustrating. I thought they were kooks. I was just like, it was very uncomfortable for a lot of it, right? But they had a thirst for growth and knowledge, and they supported that, and they supported me fulfilling out a different path, a more aligned one. And they were holding me accountable to that.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
So was there any particular avenue or route you went down to sort of seek out those groups?
No, I got involved. My sister got involved in a health and wellness network marketing company. Yeah. So network marketing companies are very big on personal development and community. Something I didn't necessarily have at the time. I had been playing soccer, semi-professional soccer for a number of years, but had come to the end of that. So I was lacking that community. Yeah. I think that was another big thing, and why sport is so massive for men, and why a lot of them do have a struggle when they finish up their careers, is that loss of community. Network marketing companies typically do promote that. So she got me involved because she knew that I was trying to, get better results. So I got involved in that purely from a health point of view, wanting to, attend to something that at least I felt I was in control of. And then I kind of just, again, it found its way. I accidentally found myself going to events to support my sister. But at the same time, I started to sponge information while just attending. I saw the work that she was doing. I saw the stuff that she was talking about. And I thought that she was crazy. Like, she was talking about so many things that I thought were like, she's lost the plot. She's absolutely lost the plot now. But then I just realized that she just seemed like she was living more purposefully and a more happier life. So, I mean, I was just curious. I never told her that I started to dig into some of the things that she was looking into because, again, I didn't want it to be right, you know? And then there was a lot of legitimacy to the way that she was viewing things. And again, I think I felt again like I was losing her. She was on the growth phase that was just incredible, right? And I felt like I wasn't keeping up and I was going to lose my relationship with my sister because we weren't seeing the world in the same way. And so I started to secretly start to delve into some of the works that she really recommended to people, like without her knowing. And I started to kind of see a completely different way. The world was a completely different thing for me. It changed it changed for some of it. It's obviously very, very continuing and a long process, but some things change on a dime, you know, they turn on a dime. And, I think that was the thing. I became so excited again by the fact that I realized I knew very little, and people kind of hate that, but that was where my freedom was. Is like, again, my detrimental mindset was from feeling like I knew a lot and that there was I'd exhausted all options, and then realizing I knew very little and I could see the world in a completely different way was super exciting. But again, I didn't want her to know that, and so I kind of secretly went about it. And then really working on and trying to understand myself better. I think there's so many resources. We're in an information era. Is that there's so much available to us right now. We just have to be curious. And I just started to become more curious than I was before, and then the layers started to become peeled back in my awareness around how I behaved and why I behaved how I behaved and what was going on with my thoughts. It became very interesting. And through that, I was my own guinea pig, and eventually I started to speak how I am speaking to you right now on some of the things that maybe I learned. And then my depression became a catalyst for so much of the value I get to have within my life and feel purposeful these days. Is learning about myself in that process has then gone and translated into me being able to talk to other people about it and providing value. So in a sense, that time where I was in my most depressed state has actually been one of the most best things that has ever happened to me, in the sense that I got a puzzle that needed solving. I was able to go and work, and now I get to, it's created a catalyst for a lot of the influence and a lot of good in my life, through overcoming that. And I think everyone has that same opportunity.
Yeah. And I think it's especially exciting. You talk about delving into the stuff that your sister was recommending. It's even more exciting, I guess, waking up to the fact that growth is a possibility, especially when you're in the position you were in, where you felt stuck with this mortgage and this bricklaying job that you probably felt you were going to have to do for the rest of your life to pay that house off.
Yeah. I think having the idea of the next 40 years is written in stone is a scary thing. I think that was where my head was at. I was like, I cannot do this for another 40 years. And I never allowed the possibility that life could go and deviate and be better and change.
That's exactly how I felt with FIFO, man. And that's why I was depressed when I lost my 4-in-1 gig, because I was like, oh shit, I think I'm stuck doing 4-in-1s. I don't have any qualifications. I can't see myself doing anything else. I don't want to be a 60-year-old dude working FIFO.
Exactly. I mean, and that's a very real and very true prospect. But again, I mean, we're taking these ideologies from a generation that worked within a time that's very different than today. Yeah. And again, just knowing that there's endless possibilities now that maybe there weren't back then, in a generation that we've still tried to adopt their ideologies and their belief systems. And of course those were them back in the day, but the times have changed, and there's unlimited amounts of possibility if we're willing to go and be curious and search out change and be comfortable being wrong and not being right all the time. I think you then become a blank slate, and you can go and create from a place of whatever you want. Just exactly like, there probably is a time in your life that you never even knew what podcasting was. You never even knew, that this would be something that you could be doing, and yet here you are. Right?
That's it, man. Sorry, what was that?
Oh, it's just a great thing. I think there's so many things there's so many things I know now that I didn't even, I didn't know were things to know or skills to learn. And I didn't even know what, we're on a podcast right now talking about these stories and stuff. I didn't know what podcasting was. You didn't know what podcasting was. Now you have this successful podcast doing a real, huge amount of good for people. And there was one point in time that you didn't know that was a possibility, but now you do. Yeah. I think people just need to look at that and hold faith in that if they do stay curious and make sure that they're trying to learn something each week. And I think this is a big thing around people's anxiety around their future, is that if you don't trust your ability to grow and learn new things, then you are going to feel like there's an anxiety around your future. Because if you don't have the control of changing yourself, then you do not feel like your ability to change your future is there. So if people set a task each week to go on, to read a certain amount of pages, or to watch a certain amount of video, or to learn a new skill, or to do your belief in your ability to change and grow, means it's hopeful that if you can change, your future can change.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've taken away from, reading about some of the most successful men there are, like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and Warren Buffett. They all talk about reading X amount of pages per day. And it doesn't even have to be topics that they're working on at the time. They just read and read, because over time they pick up things and mesh them together to create companies like what they're doing now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even right now I'm trying to learn Spanish on this app called Duolingo.
What?
And it's I'm trying to learn Spanish. So that's I had and on the app it's you got these little you got your point system, and you've got to get these streaks, and it's gamified, right? So it's actually really fun. So I set myself a task this week, but you got to remember while I know that I can't speak good Spanish right now, I do set my task, and maybe over the next year I do develop that and maybe and do get better. And that's exciting that, this week I set a task for the week of my quota of points I wanted to get on the app. Yeah. And I've met it. And I'm just really happy at the fact that I'm turning my attention to developing something, and proving to myself that I can, can learn, can learn new things. So, and that goes for everything.
I think that's a huge point you make, because we live in this world of instant gratification where likes come straight away and shit like that, microwaves. And so we feel the same way about learning and growth. It's not until you undertake something and see yourself get better over the years that you realize that patience is the key to truly get good at something.
Yeah, for sure. And people have done that over the years with things that they didn't even like. Mm-hmm. I spent 3 years in a bricklaying apprenticeship getting paid very little, and I was comfortable and happy to do that for 3 years. You know what I mean? That's the reality. I was willing to spend 3 years, get paid shit to do something I hated. I was willing to do that, but I'm not willing to kind of learn things that maybe I'm interested in. I was capable of doing that. So I know that I'm capable of doing it in other ways.
That's a good way to put it, man.
That's just the truth. I was, and I hated it. And I was like, well, you could do the exact same thing in your spare time, just with other things, and chip away at it. There was a point where I didn't know how to lay one brick, and then I knew how to build a house, but it took years. So it's the same with everything.
And I think everyone can resonate with that, because I'm sure at some point in our lives we've all done a job that we didn't like, that we eventually got good at.
Oh yeah, and I think there's a lot to take from that. It's like even if you can just take pride in your work and to be good at what you're doing. I think that was the one thing that that salvaged me was the fact that I tried to do a good job of what I was doing. I did show up at work, but on time, and I did see myself as someone who was punctual, which was
Yeah.
good. I did identify myself as someone that even while I didn't like the work I did good quality work. I was a good worker, and again, that translated into other things along the way. But again, and for those that obviously are working in jobs that, maybe you aren't the best or you don't like or you're not enjoying. I mean, even just turning your attention to, maybe just deciding you want to develop a little skill on the side, maybe a little side course or whatever, just to prove to yourself that, you're capable of and going and learning different things.
Exactly, my man. One more question about not even your story, but it's something you said at the start. Is that you see yourself as someone who is or remains authentic? Is that something you were brought up with, or is that something you've built on over the years? Because that's a hard trait to work on for most people, and it's ever evolving.
I think it's it's a tough it's a very tough one for people. I think people need to know the payoff and cost to authenticity and inauthenticity, especially like within business or if you're in the business of people or solutions. It's something that I think you acquire over time. I think you need to feel the effects of the outcomes of inauthenticity to yourself.
Yeah.
First off. And again, this is the importance of people meeting their own needs. The importance of people understanding their values and what they need and fulfilling them themselves means you don't have to go and be dependent on other people to fulfill your needs for you. I think being comfortable with displaying aspects and traits of yourself that are potentially not admirable, I think is super powerful. And this is actually, they've done studies on this, and it says that people who swear are actually more trusting, but it's not actually the swearing that makes people more trusting. It's their ability to not curb their language and show an aspect of themselves that is potentially not desirable.
Yeah.
So to people that represents that you're willing to show me not just your good, but your potential other side, that means that my risk analysis of you is actually more accurate. So I think, meeting your own needs is super important, but understanding that showing every aspect of yourself and being able to share what, you're not good at or what you're improving in, or, the things that you're fallible, goes a long way to people feeling comfortable around you, being able to be human around you as well. As well as, calling in the right people that are in alignment with you. And obviously, if you're going to find aligned people with you, you have to show up authentically. And the thing is that I talk to people all the time, and this is the thing with being authentic is, if you speak to everyone that knows me or has ever come across me, 50% will say that I'm an asshole, 50% will say I'm one of the greatest people that they ever met, and they're all correct. And right, and again, that's the trade-off. That's the trade-off. It's not whether or not people like me is not personal to me. Whether or not they dislike is not personal to me. Neither way, but I appreciate and respect myself more for potentially having someone dislike me than giving up my authenticity and my alignment. I always have more self-love for me for that than altering myself to do what I think people are going to like, and give up my authenticity. I don't grow in self-love by how many more people like me if it means that I had to give my authenticity up for it. It just doesn't work like that for me.
Yeah, and I think if you're not showing those, I guess, flawed traits or patterns of behavior that you have, internally, intuitively how you're meant to act, or the way you should be acting, what you're aligned with. So to be anything less, you're going to feel like a fraud. And like you said, like if you do display those traits, you're going to attract the right people in. You're going to make them feel comfortable being around you and trusting you. But you also allow yourself to be more comfortable with those people as well, because you have the right people. And you're not worried about them finding out about the shit that you're hiding.
Exactly. I mean, I sleep fairly easy is because, I'm quite comfortable calling myself out my shit first. Again, this is a place that some people do go, is that, they go grandiose, one way where it's like, I've been through the most pain, I've been most through this. And then they go grandiose one way where they're above being human, and they're both really dangerous places, obviously, to be in. So I think being able to allow yourself to have a full human experience, warts and all, is what we're here for. And it does come with the good and the bad.
Yep.
And expecting anything other than that is just too high or a lofty standard, and is not actually what we're here to experience. So I think there's a lot of freedom in getting to a point where, and this is the other thing. I mean, with having the payoff and cost with being inauthentic, is I will take little ego dents easily through being authentic than manipulating situations and getting into relationships or business relationships or things like that because I wanted the person to like me, only to down the road, again, my authentic self having to rear its head at some point because it just can't get pushed down forever.
Yeah.
Has to rear its head and then have to learn a bigger life lesson. And again, this is what people do, especially within the single world. And anyone who's on the call right now, single, take as many ego dents as you need authentically. Run the risk of people not wanting you with how you are. There will be eventually someone that will, but you will have to pay a bigger life lesson for manipulating yourself to act in accordance to what you think they like. Because at some point your authenticity is going to have to ring through, and it's going to crumble up the relationship. But you're going to have to learn a harder life lesson if you're not willing to take ego dents.
Exactly.
Take as many as you can within authenticity. I trust me. It'll be you're going to save yourself a lot more pain than what you think that you're avoiding. I can't even tell you.
Yeah, you can wear a mask, but sooner or later you got to take that thing off.
It'll gurgle to the surface. And it'll rear its head like a fucking dragon.
A couple quick questions before we wrap up, brother. Knowing everything that you've been through and now knowing that you're speaking, helping people, what would you say the quality of your life is like now?
I think I have I feel like I have a really good quality of life. I have good health. My family's health's pretty good. I mean, I have freedom. I'm able to again, the quality of my life is the fact that I'm living within my values and I'm attending to them. I'm in my lane.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that makes the quality of my life what it is the fact that I'm in my own lane and I'm attending to my own values that I'm not adopting from anyone else.
Sick.
That's really what is dictating that. It's not what I have. It's not what I do. It's not and it's the fact that it is in alignment with what my own values are. And I'm not adopting anyone else's. That's what makes my life quality to me.
Sick, man. You've touched on a few already, but what have you added to your life or removed from it to improve the quality of it?
Added and removed people. Obviously always a big one. Again, like I said before, I mean, I think if anyone can develop any trait, it's just curiosity. I think that's just going to hold him in good stead. I developed that. I eliminated a fixed mindset. Again, I've always kind of placed health as a pivotal point. I kind of look at things holistically. So again, it's easy to kind of work out what to eliminate and to hold on to when you kind of create a vision for yourself, not necessarily what you want in life, but for yourself, and then ask the question whether or not everything is in accordance to that version or the version that you are now. I think that kind of allows you to be able to navigate life in a way where you know what to eliminate and what to add in accordance to that. But I've added people that are just going to hold me accountable. I've added mentors. I've eliminated distractions out of my life. Yeah. People think that a lot of people are just disciplined. I think people just kind of eliminate potential distractions from them. I think it's less about discipline and making things that are not good habits more invisible.
Yeah.
So you're not tempted by that. I think that I've done better at eliminating those things out of my foresight. Yeah, I mean, there's so many consistently like, again, we're always just flowing through this thing, kind of trying to work everything out, right? I haven't got it completely worked, like not even close to completely worked out, so always adding and subtracting and seeing what sits and what doesn't. And, but yeah, those are a few things.
Cool. What are you most grateful for right now?
For sure, my health and my family's health.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Last question. If you had the chance to put a message on a billboard where thousands of people would see it every day, what would that message be?
There's always one of these questions at the end of these podcasts that it's just that you cannot prepare for.
And I'm willing to have a topless photo of you on that billboard.
Oh no! I mean, yeah, probably in Perth that wouldn't go down too well. I think, I don't know. I think every day I'm just like, I'm grateful for any emotion, because there's gonna be a day that I'm 100% not gonna be able to feel anything. I am just so grateful for any emotion. I just really am. Even when I feel like shit, I just say to myself, at least I get to feel this. There are 122 billion people that have come before us that would trade positions with me in a heartbeat just to feel anything. And I just know what a gift it is to feel anything, even if it's not the most desired, even if it's not the Ferrari of emotions. I just have gratitude for feeling anything, because I know 100% without doubt, and there's not many things that I can say this, it would be a day that I do go and I won't be able to feel anything. But up until then, as long as I'm feeling something, it's a fucking gift, honestly.
That's
something to
powerful,
do,
man.
Something to do with that, man. Honest to God, that there alone has been fantastic for me.
I can see that lights you up, man.
Oh, I can't even tell you, man. Like, to be grateful for emotions people despise, that in itself is an incredible thing with a shift in perspective. Like, and again, I'm agnostic, so I don't know what comes after this. It could be nothingness. Yep. So anything right now is my outcome, is everything to me, is a fucking gift. Like, I can't tell you. And again, I do have these days, and I sit in it, I don't judge it, and I'm like, yes. And it's like, there will be a day where you don't even get to feel this. How grateful are you? And I just suck myself into a state of gratitude. Really.
That's amazing, bro. One of the best answers I think I've had.
Well, I mean, I'm just red hot on that, man. I'm fucking so red hot on that.
Okay. If anyone's connecting with you, do you provide any service or anything at the moment?
Well, obviously, I build out a team. I do a lot of my work within that realm. So obviously, if people want to improve their health, it's something that I focus on. If people want to improve their mindset and a whole bunch of other things, then obviously they can connect. I do a lot of my work within the realms of my company. Yep. But I do offer coaching by the hour through. I typically just kind of connect through my social media. I have a website, but it's down for improvement. Cool. Right now, I'm kind of working my way to getting that back up, but typically through social media is where I connect most. So on Instagram, I got into Instagram super late, by the way. So this explains my handle __ Ben James _ So it's obviously not best for branding, but that's all that was left by the time that I clued onto Instagram. And then Ben Kelly on Facebook. Cool. Otherwise, info@benjameskelly.com is my email as well.
Sweet. I'll link all of those in the show notes anyway, brother.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Awesome, my man. To wrap up, just want to acknowledge you for taking the time to do this, fighting through that Bali Wi-Fi and downloading Skype.
Well, the government's messing around. The funny thing with the internet right now is they've just had their elections here, and the government's messing around with the Wi-Fi to foil terror plots. So they're making it go in and out across the country right now. So it's a bit of a ruffle with the Wi-Fi. But I'm really glad that it worked out for us to be able to do this call.
Thanks, bro. I just want to say before we go that I appreciate you for being someone in your position, having gone through what you've gone through, and now sharing a message like this, especially that one where you're grateful, showing gratitude for emotion, brother. Super powerful. It's beautiful, and I'm grateful that there's someone like you doing that.
Oh, and I really appreciate that. I really appreciate you for thinking of me to come on to this. I know this is your baby. I know how much you care about this, and I just want to acknowledge you for the work that you're doing. It doesn't go unacknowledged. I know like many, maybe you don't give yourself as much acknowledgement as you deserve. So I want to make sure that I do give that to you, man. I appreciate how you're showing up in the world and what you're doing with this, and I have a lot of love and respect for the way that you go about things, man. So yeah, thank you.
Brother. Take care, eh?
All right, brother. Thank you.
Bye.